අද්විතීය 200 Mbps ස්පීඩ් එකකින් ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ වේගවත්ම සහ පුළුල්තම හෝම් බ්‍රෝඩ්බෑන්ඩ් සම්බන්ධතාවය වන SLT Mobitel දේශීය ෆයිබර් බලවේගය ඔබත් අදම අත්විඳින්න.
හරිම සුදුයි.
Tonight on First at 9 this Tuesday, the 15th of August 2023. Manna energized. Manna to be transformed as an energy hub, says President Ranil Wickremesinghe.
ඒක කේන්ද්‍ර ස්ථානයක් බවට පත් වෙනකොට මන්නාරම නගරය දියුණු කරන්න අලුතෙන් පූනරීන් නගරේ බලශක්ති නගරයක් ඇති කරන්නත් දැන් සැලසුම් අරගෙන යනවා.
Sri Lanka's Apostolic Nuncio calls on religious leaders to lead by example.
Religious leaders of all the religions should lead by example and should be unifiers and not agents of division.
Power steady. Power Minister assures of an uninterrupted supply of power.
We have advertised for longer term, 1 year or 2 year or 3 years power purchasing. As a government, our priority is make sure that there is uninterrupted supply of power. When we go into the tariff revision by January to reduce the cost further.
Reveals plans for long-term power purchasing whilst taking the country's weather into account.
There is no danger of power cuts unless we have a major failure in one of our power plants.
Tensions. Indian media reports of an arrival of another Chinese research vessel to Sri Lanka in October this year sparks concerns in New Delhi. Relaxed vehicles. Government lifts import bans on motor vehicles for public transport. Uncleared vehicles allowed to be cleared with payment of an additional surcharge.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දිනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක. Rhino Cement Roofing Sheets. හොඳම මිලට කල් පවතින වහරයක්.
This is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and a warm welcome to today's edition of AdaDerana's English News, First at 9. I am Jonathan Benedict and we're here to look at your top story right now. President Ranil Wickremesinghe today revealed that the government aims to transform the Manna district of the northern province into an energy hub. Addressing the annual feast of the Shrine of Our Lady of Madhu, the President said that an intercity express train service between Thale Manna and Colombo will commence on the 15th of September, aiming at enhancing connectivity and to facilitate smoother travel between both cities. Apostolic Nuncio in Sri Lanka, Archbishop Brian Udegwa, who was also present at the gathering, emphasized that religious leaders have a crucial role in maintaining peace and harmony in the country. He firmly stressed that they should refrain from spreading hate and propagate healthy virtues.
The annual feast of the Shrine of Our Lady of Madhu was held today under the patronage of President Ranil Wickremesinghe and Apostolic Nuncio to Sri Lanka, Archbishop Brian Udegwa.
මේ සූර්ය බලය, සුළඟ බලය, හරිත බලයෙන් විශාල බල ශක්තියක් ලංකාවට මේ ප්‍රදේශයෙන් ලැබෙනවා. මේක කේන්ද්‍ර ස්ථානයක් බවට පත් වෙනකොට මන්නාරම නගරය දියුණු කරන්න, අලුතෙන් පූනරීන් නගරේ බල ශක්ති නගරයක් ඇති කරන්නත් දැන් සැලසුම් අරගෙන යනවා. කාතකින් මේ වැඩ කටයුතු කරන ගමන් අපි එක කාරණයක් මතක තියාගන්න ඕනේ. මේ සුද්ධ වූ භූමිය ආරක්ෂා කරන්න ඕනේ. මේ වනාන්තර ආරක්ෂා කරන්න ඕනේ. ඒ නිසා හැම පියවරකදීම මේ සුද්ධ වූ ස්ථානයේ හැමක සාකච්ඡා කරන්න කියලා මම මගේ අදාළ නිලධාරීන් දැනුම් දීලා තියෙනවා. දැනටම පූර්ණකරීන් වැවේ සූර්ය බලය ලබා ගන්නට අපි මූලික සාකච්ඡා පවත්වාගෙන යනවා. සැප්තැම්බර් මාසයේ 15 වෙනිදා ඉඳන් තලේ මන්නාරම ඉඳන් කොළඹටත් කොළඹ ඉඳන් තලේ මන්ට ශීඝ්‍ර සේව එක්ස්ප්‍රෙස් දුම්රිය සේවයක් ආරම්භ කරනවා. දැනටම මෙහාට අලුත් සීනි කර්මාන්ත ශාලාවක් ලබා ගන්න වන්නේට අපි පියවර අරගෙන අනුමැතිය දීලා තියෙනවා. ඔබ සියලු දෙනාම එකට වෙලා මේ ප්‍රදේශයේ දියුණු කරන්නට.
It is time for reconciliation. We commend the authorities for the efforts being made along this line of reconciliation. At the same time, we pray and hope that the process will adequately address the non-troubling cases that the President himself clearly mentioned in his speech to the parliament about a week ago. You should not allow the few unscrupulous elements that are indeed a minuscule minority to negatively influence and disorient you. The religious leaders of different religions should play a leading role and direct the people to the right principles of love and fraternity. It is unacceptable for any religious leader to take advantage of the medium, respect, and privilege accorded to them to denigrate other religions. They, or we, religious leaders of all the religions, should lead by example and should be unifiers and not agents of division.
Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Wijesekara emphasized that no power cuts are to be expected following the procurement of additional supplementary power and the existence of additional adequate power within the grid system to assist with weather-related issues. Addressing a media briefing today, the minister further commented on the termination of the Hambantota oil refinery project, adding that the request for a proposal of a new export-oriented refinery is currently underway. Further, Minister Wijesekara stressed on the government's aim to maintain an uninterrupted supply of power, mentioning that a long-term power purchasing project is yet to be implemented.
We need at least about 100 megawatts. So we'll need to get both power plants. So as much possible power utilizing those power plants will also be additional benefit, because then we can maybe, if there is a surplus of power, we can stop some of the high costing power plants that are in use right now. So we will be utilizing the maximum possible private power purchasing in this regard. We have advertised back in July to procure power that is needed to maintain an uninterrupted supply. We made this advertisement some time ago, taking into account if there is a failure in one of our power plants. Now, we see that Norochchole power plant has gone through multiple breakdowns this year and last year. So if there is a instance where we have a breakdown in almost all the power plants operated by CEB, and if there is no other choice but to go into private purchasing immediately, it will be additional cost to us. Because of the climate impact, what we are seeing right now is very little rain into the catchment areas, and we are seeing droughts being forecasted for next year as well. So with that in mind, we have advertised for longer term, 1 year or 2 year or 3 years, long-term power purchasing. As a government, our priority is number one, make sure that there is uninterrupted supply of power. Number two, when we go into the tariff revision by January, to reduce the cost further. So to reduce the cost further, we'll have to go to all options possible within our grid and to connect to our grid, which will be least cost power purchasing models. Since the Norochchole coal power plant, no new power plants have been connected to our grid. 120 megawatts of hydropower will be connected to the grid by November with the Huawei facility. But after that, there won't be large-scale power projects coming in. So we want to make sure that until the big projects like the Adani wind power project of 500 megawatts by January 2025, and the other projects that are kicking in right now, Siamalandu 100 megawatts, 135 megawatts in Sampur, those will drastically reduce our cost of energy. But until that time, the next 12 months is going to be crucial. So we need to, one, maintain the supply. Number two, bring the prices down as much as possible. Negotiations are ongoing, so I hope by the end of the week at least they will finalize the power purchasing agreements.
At this point, are you ruling out any power cuts, or do you think that there is a danger of power cuts in the next 2-3 months?
There is no danger of power cuts unless we have a major failure in one of our power plants. I'm comfortable right now with the connection from Polpitia to New Hambantota line being connected by Sunday or Monday, and then the additional supplementary power that has been procured right now, that we won't need to go in for power cuts. Even if there is droughts, we have additional enough power within the grid system so we can support that. And we are also expecting some sort of rain in October. So the rain that we do get in October, we'll have to manage it.
There was this cabinet briefing today with reference to the refinery in Lanka. Can you give us some details of what was the contract that was cancelled?
The agreement that was cancelled was the agreement that has expired that was entered in 2017 or 18. There was a proposal to set up a refinery, Hambantota Refinery Company, from a Oman investment. So that lease agreement has expired and there was no investment that had taken place. So due to that, the lease agreement and the BUI agreement was terminated. But the ongoing RFP process for a new refinery, export-oriented refinery, in coordination with BOI and the Ministry of Power and Energy is ongoing. And we have given the shortlisted companies the RFP documents. They have requested yesterday for a 2-week extension to hand over the documents. So by the 30th of August, we will have the closing date for the RFP documents for the shortlisted companies. It will probably take about another 1 month or 6 weeks to evaluate the RFP documents and we will award it to the suitable developer after that. So the companies to namely Sinopec and Vitol were given the RFP documents, so they will have to submit them before the 30th of August.
The Cabinet of Sri Lanka has granted approval to a proposal by President Ranil Wickremesinghe to advise the legal draftsman to prepare a bill based on a preliminary draft prepared to enact laws to prevent deviation from bilateral and multilateral agreements without the consent of relevant parties. Meanwhile, a separate department is set to establish a provision of facilities for stakeholders of the cinnamon export industry in the country. With that, let's take an in-depth look at these stories and other developments following yesterday's cabinet meeting.
The Cabinet of Ministers approved the proposal presented by President Ranil Wickremesinghe to advise legal draftsmen to prepare a bill based on a preliminary draft prepared to enact laws preventing parties deviating from bilateral and multilateral agreements.
පසුගිය කාල පරිච්ඡේදය තුළ ශ්‍රී ලංකා ආණ්ඩුව ද්විපාර්ශ්වික හා බහුපාර්ශ්වික වශයෙන් ජාත්‍යන්තරව ඇති කර තිබෙන ගිවිසුම් ශනිකව විශේෂ තත්ත්වයන්ගෙන් තොරව අවලංගු කිරීම නිසා ශ්‍රී ලංකා රජයේ විශ්වසනීයවත් භාවය පිළිබඳ විශාල ප්‍රශ්නයක් අන්තර්ජාතිකව මතුවලා තිබෙනවා. එක ආණ්ඩුවක් සමග ගිවිසුමක් අත්සන් කළාම ඊළඟට බලයට පැමිණෙන ආණ්ඩුව හෝ වෙනත් එම ආණ්ඩුව විසින් හෝ ඒ ගිවිසුම ශනේකින් විශේෂ වග විභාගයකින් තොරව මේ අවලංගු කළොත් ඒ තුලින් ඒ රටක් වශයෙන් ඇතිවන අහිතකර ප්‍රතිඵල වැළැක්වීම සඳහා ජනාධිපතිතුමා යෝජනා කරන්නේ ඒ ගිවිසුමට සම්බන්ධ අනිත් පාර්ශ්වයන්ගෙනුත් අදහස් කිසිවක් විමසන්නේ නැතිව එක්වරම ගිවිසුම් අත්සන් කළ නොහැකි වෙන විදියට නීතියක් ලංකාව තුළ ස්ථාපිත කිරීම සඳහා එතුමා ඉදිරිපත් කළ යෝජනාවට කැබිනට් අනුමැතිය ලබා දුන්නා.
The Cabinet also approved a proposal presented by the President to establish a National Productivity Commission empowered with legal eligibility to act formally with regard to productivity and related issues in the country.
පවතින ආර්ථික අර්බුදය හමුවේ අපි නිෂ්පාදන ආර්ථිකයක් ගොඩනගන්න ඕනේ. නිෂ්පාදන ආර්ථිකයේ තුල අඩු අවම යෙදුම් ප්‍රමාණයකින් වැඩි නිමවුම් ප්‍රමාණයක් ලබා ගන්න හැකි වෙන පරිදි ඵලදායීතාවයේ ඉහළ නැංවීම කරන්නටත් ආර්ථික ප්‍රතිසංස්කරණ ක්‍රියාත්මක කිරීමේදී එහිදී ලැබෙන ප්‍රතිලාභ උපරිම තලයකට ගෙනීම සඳහා සෑම අංශයකම ඵලදායීතාවයේ වර්ධනය කිරීම අත්‍යවශ්‍ය සාධකයක් ලෙස හඳුන්වගෙන තිබෙනවා. තාක්ෂණය සහ පරිපාලනමය වෙනස්කම් තුලින් ඵලදායීතාවයේ සම්බන්ධයෙන් ඇතිවන ගැටලු විධිමත්ව කිරීම සඳහා නීතිමය වශයෙන් වක්කිය යුතු ආයතනයන් මෙරට ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙන්නේ නැහැ. එබැවින් ස්වාධීන ආයතනයක් වශයෙන් ජාතික ඵලදායීතා කොමිෂන් සභාවක් ස්ථාපිත කිරීම සඳහා ජනාධිපතිතුමා ඉදිරිපත් කළ යෝජනාවට කැබිනට් අනුමැතිය ලබා දුන්නා.
Meanwhile, in other cabinet decisions, it was also decided that the Department of Cinnamon Development be established to provide facilities for stakeholders of the cinnamon export industry in the country, with the hope that it will be promoted as a commercial crop as a budget proposal for the year 2023.
ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ සම්ප්‍රදායික වශයෙන් හා සම්ප්‍රදායික නොවන ආකාරයටත් ඉතා විශාල වැදගත්කමකින් යුත් අපනයන භෝගයක් කුරුඳු. ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ අපනයන විවිධාංගීකරණය සහ අපනයන සඳහා වැඩි අගයක් එකතු කිරීම අපනයන නවීකරණය සහ අපනයන වෙළඳපොළ ප්‍රසාරණය සඳහා අත්‍යවශ්‍ය කටයුත්තක් කුරුඳු නිෂ්පාදනය තවදුරටත් සංවර්ධනය කිරීම රට තුළ. ඒ සඳහා සුළු අපනයන භෝගයක් වශයෙන් විශාල විදේශ විනිමය ආදායමක් උපදවන අතර ඒ සඳහා අගයන් එකතු කළොත් අපිට ජාත්‍යන්තර වෙළඳපොලේ නියම කුරුඳු තිබෙන්නේ අපේ රටට වීමේ වාසිය පදනම් කරගෙන විශාල විනිමය ප්‍රමාණයක් උපදව ගන්නටත් ඒ තුලින් රටේ නිමවුම ආදායම සේවා නියුක්තිය යනාදී ඉහළ නංව ගන්නටත් ඉඩ ප්‍රස්තාව ලැබෙන නිසා මේ සඳහා කුරුඳු සංවර්ධන දෙපාර්තමේන්තුව නමින් නව දෙපාර්තමේන්තුවක් පිහිටුවීමට ඉදිරිපත් කළ කැබිනට් පත්‍රිකාවට අනුමැතිය ලැබුණා.
Further, the Cabinet of Ministers approved guidelines prepared by the Minister of Justice to be followed in relation to the implementation and performance of the powers, functions and duties of the Office of Missing Persons. The Cabinet of Ministers also approved a proposal presented by the Aviation Minister to award the contracts for the supply of aviation fuel to Sri Lankan Airlines aircrafts for a period of 2 years to fuel suppliers, Qatar Fuel Company and Kuwait Aviation Fueling Company at Hamad Airport and Kuwait Airport as a direct contract.
In other news, Cabinet spokesperson Minister Dr. Bandula Gunawardena today confirmed that no decision has been made to sell Channel I, a subsidiary of the Sri Lanka Rupavahini Corporation, to privately owned foreign media corporation, Lanka Incorporated. However, the minister did confirm that airtime of the channel, limited to a few hours, has been leased to said company for a sum of 25 million rupees a month. He said that the implementation of the decision to lease airtime does not need cabinet approval and can be done with the director board's approval of the corporation alone.
රූපවාහිනී සංස්ථාව සතුව අයි නාලිකාව කුඩා වෙලාවක් පැය 4ක් 5ක් කාලයක් තමයි පවත්වාගෙන යන්නේ. පවත්වාගෙන යා නොහැකි තත්වයට ආදායම් නැති නිසා. ඒක නිසා විදුලි බිල ගෙවීම පවා ප්‍රශ්නයක් බවට පත් වෙලා ඊටම අලාභ ලබන අයි නාලිකාව ගුවන් කාලයේ පමණක් කෙටි කාලීන ගිවිසුම් සම්බන්ධතාවයක් මත රූපවාහිනී සංස්ථාවේ අධ්‍යක්ෂක මණ්ඩලය විසින් තීරණය කරලා මගෙත් අනුමැතිය ලබාගෙන කෙටි කාලයකට ගුවන් කාලයේ බද්දට ලබා දීලා තියෙනවා විශාල බදු මුදලකට මාසකට මිලියන 25කට. ඒ සඳහා කැබිනට් මන්ත්‍රයට ගෙනෙන්න අවශ්‍ය නැහැ. අධ්‍යක්ෂක මණ්ඩලයේ තීරණය අනුව කටයුතු කරන්න පුළුවන්. වඩා වාසිදායක වෙන නිසා කෙටි කාලයකට ලබා දීලා තියෙනවා ගුවන් කාලය ලයිකා සමාගමට. ඒත් ලබා දීලා තියෙන්නේ මේ ක්‍රිකට් ක්‍රීඩාව සහ අනිකුත් ක්‍රීඩාවන් සඳහා පමණයි. ඕනෑම සංවිධානයකට පුළුවන් ඒ සඳහා සුදුසුකම් තිබෙනවා නම් මිලියන 60ක් 70ක් 100ක් වගේ දීලා ගන්නවා නම් අවමේ පටන් ගන්න වෙන්නේ 25කින් ඕන කෙනෙක් ටෙන්ඩරය සඳහා ඉදිරිපත් වෙන්න මම ගුවන් කාලයේ බදු දීමේ ටෙන්ඩර් පත්‍රිකාව ඊළඟ අධ්‍යක්ෂක මණ්ඩල තීන්දුව ගැනීමෙන් පසු ප්‍රසිද්ධියේ ප්‍රකාශයට පත් කරනවා. මේ කිවිසුමකට කිසි ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ. මොකද මේ කිවිසුමේ ඉතා පැහැදිලිව සඳහන් කරලා තියෙනවා මාසයක කාලයක දැනුම් දීමෙන් මේ කිවිසුම අවලංගු වෙනවා.
Indian media reports that a Chinese marine research vessel expected to dock in Sri Lanka late October this year is creating serious concerns in India. According to the Hindustan Times, the Sri Lankan government is still to give clearance to the maritime research vessel Shi Yan 6, which is expected to visit Sri Lanka. This development comes a year after the docking of the Chinese research and surveillance vessel Yuan Wang 5 at the Hambantota International Port. According to Indian newspaper The Hindustan Times, Chinese marine research vessel Shi Yan 6 is expected to arrive in Sri Lanka and dock at Colombo and Hambantota International Airports late October. The newspaper reported that the Sri Lankan government is yet to approve clearance for the maritime research vessel. This development comes a few days after the arrival of China's People's Liberation Army Navy warship Hai Yang 24 Hao at the port of Colombo on a formal visit with a crew of 138 members. The Indian newspaper reported that the 3,999-ton Shi Yang 6, based in Guangzhou, is currently in the South China Sea and moving further south. Further, the Hindustan Times reports that scientists of Sri Lanka's National Aquatic Resource Research and Development Agency will embark on Shi Yang 6 to conduct surveys of the exclusive economic zone of the island nation and in the South Indian Ocean. The vessel, which is expected to stay till November, is expected to carry out surveys for nearly a month, with one part of surveys being without Sri Lankan scientists on board. The Indian newspaper stated that New Delhi informed Colombo that it is seriously concerned about Chinese research vessel Shi Yang 6 docking at the Colombo and Hambantota ports. Business news on the other side of this short break. Stay with us.
ගොඩමඩ පෙරලි කරන බලපුළුවන්කාරයා මහින්ද්‍රා යුවෝ ඩීමෝ වෙතින්. වැඩම ගොඩයි ගොඩම තමයි ස්වරාජ් ට්‍රැක්ටර් ඩීමෝ වෙතින්.
Welcome back. The Ministry of Finance issued an extraordinary gazette is easing the import restrictions on motor vehicles including lorries, trucks and buses used for public transport. Following this development, State Minister of Finance Ranjit Siamalapitia says that the heavy vehicles which arrived at ports during the period of the import ban and still remain uncleared can be cleared following the payment of a surcharge.
On Sunday, State Minister of Finance Ranjit Siambalapitiya said that the government is considering the immediate lift of import restrictions imposed on lorries, trucks and buses used for public transport. Following that announcement, a gazette notification was issued by the Ministry of Finance relaxing the existing restrictions on the importation of motor vehicles for public transport purposes. Further, State Minister of Finance Ranjit Siambalapitiya said that the government has taken steps to release the heavy vehicles imported during the period of import ban that was imposed on the 20th of March 2020.
සවත් වැදගත් තීරණයක් ගනු ලැබුවා මේ තහනම් කාල සීමාව ගෙනාපු මේ කාණ්ඩයට අයිති බස් රථ සහ ලොරි රථ සෑහෙන ප්‍රමාණයක් වරායේ දාස් නොකරගෙන තියෙන තත්ත්වයක් අපි දකිනවා. දැනට මේ තහනම් කාල සීමාවේ ගෙනල්ලා රේගු ප්‍රකාශන ඉදිරිපත් කර නොමැති බස් රථ සඳහා සහ ට්‍රක් රථ සඳහා ආනයන අපරණ පාලක කරුණු ඉදිරිපත් කරලා ලබා ගන්න අවසරයක් තුල එම වාහනවල බදු රහිත තොටුපළේ වටිනාකමට 30% අමතර බද්දක් ගෙවලා ඒ වාහනත් නිදහස් කරගන්න. ඒ තුලින් දැනට වරායේ රඳවාගෙන තියෙන වාහන සම්බන්ධව තිබෙන තදබදයක් යම් ප්‍රමාණයක ඉවත් කරන්න අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා.
Sri Lanka's Purchasing Managers Index or PMI for the month of July fell to 44.6 index points from 47.3 a month earlier. This setback was contributed by subdued performances observed in all sub-indices. The services sector PMI for the month of July, however, showed strong growth, recording an index value of 59.5.
The Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index showed a decline in July 2023, recording an index value of 44.6. The central bank said that the decline in production and new orders was mainly due to the setback in the manufacture of food and beverages, textile and apparel sectors. Most of the respondents in the manufacture of food and beverages sector still suffer from subdued demand conditions. Despite the reduction in market prices, while manufacturers in the textile and apparel sector endured a lack of new orders amidst intense competition in the global market and unfavorable demand conditions. Meanwhile, employment, stock of purchases and suppliers' delivery time sub-indices also decreased in line with the decline in new orders and production, as companies tended to replace only the essential staff and maintain a minimum raw material stock. Suppliers' delivery time remained shortened during the month. However, the central bank said that manufacturing activities for the next 3 months indicated a marginal improvement considering the current economic environment. On a global level, the manufacturing PMI remained unchanged at 48.7 in July from a month earlier. Manufacturing PMIs of India and Singapore improved at a slower pace in July 2023. However, manufacturing PMIs of the Eurozone, UK and USA deteriorated in July 2023 compared to the previous month. In the services sector, PMI increased further, recording an index value of 59.5 in July 2023, driven by new businesses, business activities and expectations for activity. New businesses increased in July 2023 compared to June 2023, mainly in the financial services, other personal services and professional services subsectors. Expectations for business activities for the next 3 months remain positive due to prevailing conducive economic conditions. Meanwhile, backlogs of work also decreased at a slower rate during the month. On a global level, services PMI increased to 52.7 in July. Services PMIs of China, India, UK, USA and Japan indicated that their service sectors expanded in July 2023 compared to the previous month.
The national carrier of Russia, Aeroflot, has announced plans to increase the frequency of flights between Moscow and Sri Lanka. Aeroflot will increase the frequency of flights to Colombo, operating thrice weekly flights, with an additional service taking off on Saturdays from Moscow and on Sundays from Colombo, beginning 9th September. Flight SU-288 is reportedly scheduled to depart from Moscow at 10:50 p.m. and arrive in Colombo at 10:20 a.m. the following day. Flight SU-289 is timed to leave Sri Lanka at 12:05 p.m. and arrive in Moscow at 6:40 p.m. Under the extra service, flights to Colombo from Moscow will be operated on Thursdays, Saturdays and Sundays, with return flights to Moscow on Fridays, Sundays and Mondays. In stocks news today, Sri Lanka shares ended lower, dragged down by financials and industrial stocks. The Colombo Stock Exchange All-Share Price Index closed down 1.47% at 11,224.22 points, while the S&P SL20 closed 1.62% down at 3,257.35 points. Commercial Bank of Ceylon PLC and LOLC Finance PLC were the top losers on the index, down 4.22% and 1.75% respectively. Equity market turnover fell to 2.12 billion Sri Lankan rupees from 3.99 billion rupees in the previous session. The banking sector was the top contributor to market turnover today, while the diversified financial sector was the second highest contributor. Meanwhile, trading volume on the Colombo Stock Exchange Index fell to 86.4 million shares from 137.2 million shares in the previous session. Foreign investors were net sellers, offloading stocks worth 155.5 million rupees, while domestic investors were net buyers, purchasing shares worth 2.07 billion rupees. With that, let's have a look at how the rupee fared against other major currencies around the world today. That wraps up all the news I have for you this evening. Join us again tomorrow at the same time for more updates on the day on news from the day. For now, I'm Jonathan Benedict wishing you a good night and a blessed Wednesday ahead.